these coffee talks back, and I'm happy to have Congressman Dwight Evans join us for our first one back this summer. So good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning. So let's talk a little bit about your background so our members have an idea of all your great accomplishments and here in Philadelphia and in DC.
Well, I was, prior to coming to the DC, I was in the state legislature for 36 years. And I was chairman of the House Appropriation Committee for over 20 plus years. So, you know, that state experience has been extremely helpful to my federal experience. I'm now in Washington for 4 years. And when I think about when I first went in the legislature about almost 40 years ago, I thought I was somewhat clear about my mission, but I'm even more clear about my mission and my vision. I don't think any of us coming in when there would be a pandemic. Never time have I ever seen anything like it. So when I went to Washington, the committees I focused on was obviously small business, because that is the backbone of the nation. And that's something I did a lot with when I was at the state level. The other thing is agriculture. Pennsylvania is extremely valiant to agriculture. And then last but not least is Ways and Means. Ways and Means is the oldest committee in the United States Congress. And what's interesting is 4 people, the first chairman of Ways and Means was right from the city of Philadelphia. And Thaddeus Stevenson from Lancaster was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, because that's the committee, obviously, that creates the opportunity. So I was on the Appropriation Committee, which when Ben Franklin was chairman it was the Ways and Means Committee that evolved. Now I'm in Washington and I'm on the committee. So it's that kind of combination of the appropriation and the Ways and Means, agriculture, small business, which has, I think, prepared me and put me in a great position in Washington, DC. Now, I say this to all of you because, first and foremost, what I think the most important, that we all are citizens. We value the important citizenship. Democracy is some self-driven, has to be driven by us. And no matter where we're on particular whatever issues, the fact of the matter is making sure democracy works and operates is something that has to be solved. I always talk about the aspect of self-enlightened leadership. Leadership that fully understands in our collective interest to really make a difference. We just had a person who was like a hero, a Congressman Lewis, just died. I had never been to Alabama prior to me meeting him in Washington, D.C. As a young kid, I recall seeing it on Walk the
red flag on the account so that they can take a look at it.
On Walk the Concrete, I recall seeing him when I was a little kid going across the Pettit Bridge. And one thing that Congressman Lewis used to always talk about, and his parents didn't want him to get in the middle of the freedom rides and those other kind of things. It basically was, he got into what he called good trouble. And that good trouble was, his view was, you can't stand by and just watch something take place that is not correct. You must keep your eye on the prize. So that, in a sense, as strange as may be, 10 years old, seeing him on television, contribute to my being in public office. I ran for public office when I was 25 years old. I got elected when I was 25. and I was sworn in when I was 26. So that, from the Pettit Bridge to John Lewis, contribute to my growth and development of being in public office. You know, I mean, it took time because I used to work for the Urban League. The Urban League was one of what they called the Big Six. In 1963, John Lewis was one with Dr. Martin Luther King, Whitney Young. I worked for the Philadelphia Urban League. So I can't say to you that I knew those influences was having an effect on me to where I am today, to what I try to do. And I think I'll close with this. This is a great state. I mean, I'm no knock at the other 49, but this state is in a very key position. Is, as you know, 67 counties, it's about 12 million people, and it's a fantastic state. And, you know, we have some challenges, there's no question about that, but we can deal with them. So what I've tried to do through small business, I'm vice chair of small business committee on the Ways and Means Committee, I'm on the subcommittee on health, and then I am on the Working Families Subcommittee. All that is much more intentional than I could say to you when I started back in 1980 and laid the ground. So that's kind of where I am today.
That's quite impressive. Very impressive. 25. That's wonderful. Inspirational to a lot of people, I'm sure. So I'm glad you touched on everything that you talked about. I want to go a little deeper and talk about some of that, but I just wanted to see how are you dealing with the COVID these past few months? Your family, everybody healthy? And
yeah. My mom just had a birthday yesterday. She just turned 87 years of age.
for her, happy birthday to Mom.
7 years of age. She's her mother died in 1992 and she was 82. So she's lived 5 years longer than her mother has. Brothers and sisters are all fine. They're doing great. You know, this pandemic is, you know, worldwide and somewhat unique that we all are trying to understand. There's not really any instant answers to it. And really the part about navigating it, which I think is the most important thing. You know, when I was a kid growing up, and you think about, used to see movies when certain things used to happen around certain type of disease, and they said quarantine and you know, put you in certain situations. But I think, you know, we unfortunately live in a situation where it's not fairly distribute how to respond to the quarantine. Because as you know, you're in real estate, and you know, real estate is extremely important in a person's ability to where they quarantine, or do they have the ability to quarantine. There are some communities that have more than others, particularly communities of color. I mean, if you look at certain numbers and based on economic ability, a person to either rent, buy, purchase. So that's where the federal government comes in. The chairman of the Federal Reserve said, go bold and go big. Go bold and go big. Well, the HEROES Act, never had I ever experienced that type of legislation, was $2.2 trillion. 2.2 trillion. That was like a safety net to individuals, a safety net to businesses, a safety net to this country. And when you think about it, what exactly it did was, it was basically, as some people thought this was going to be like a short period of transition, but that's where the medical people come in, that's where the researchers come in, that's where the doctors come in. It's not as simple as what most people thought it would be. The World Organization announced today today I saw where they said it may be longer than 2021, going into 2021, it may be longer. So that means a new definition of how you redefine how you operate and what is defined as normal. I mean, what is defined as normal today? How do you operate? Where do you operate? So in a strange way, the house, the home has become that shelter in. But you know, it is great, especially if you have the necessary tools to shelter in a home. I mean, you're looking at redefining what is meant by shelter in today. I mean, you're really looking at, I mean, you know, how many people can actually stay at home and work from home? Do you have Wi-Fi? Look at education, food person. I mean, things like Wi-Fi, Amazon.com, all those things were helpful. I was looking at the gentleman who owns the Los Angeles Clippers, who used to be with Microsoft, and he said when they first bought Skype, they didn't think much of it, right? But now, you know how many platforms there are of forms of communication, from Zoom to Skype to web, you name it. You need those mechanisms in order to keep the society going, in order to protect your health, right? And connect with people, because the aspect of communication. So how do we keep the economy going? So when you talk about the new norm today, there is a new norm that we have never seen before. We're not even sure of how we're going to recreate. And then the business models that need to exist in order to function. So that's why, to me, the federal government, more so than the states, the cities, local governments, is the safety line when you talk about it. It's the only thing. And as you see, which I am not particularly excited about, the pettiness sometime when that takes place, which should be focused on, you know, there's people, you can talk about those who are going to do unemployment. Small businesses is being devastated. I mean, they're being devastated. And, you know, our ability to execute and implement. So here I am in Washington in my second term. It's like my second term. There was no way I was anticipating this to occur. So I'm trying to do what I normally do when I was in the legislature, trying to figure out how to work together. That's what I'm trying to figure out. It's not completely the way I would like it to be, but that's my mission. You know, that's what I see my task is, to do something for people.
No, I think that's great. And, you know, while we're talking about housing and sheltering and people being able to quarantine or, you know, stay in place with housing, do you think there's more funding needed for the issues of evictions and affordable housing?
Oh, well, the answer is absolutely. I have organized 3 housing, which I call sort of like my own little form of brain trust. I've gotten the housing advocates together.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way that the federal government works is that the initiatives go to the state or to the local, and then they deal with the nonprofits who are responsible for implementations. And then also, by sitting on Ways and Means, I deal with tax policy. For example, PHFA is depending a great deal upon what happens with tax policy. New market tax credits, those type of tools are needed. They're needed more than ever before, because the whole question is, how does a person have access to the market fairly? That's the fundamental question. Mm-hmm. And there is the question that when people are out of work, that, you know, you can talk about unemployment, you can talk about the stimulus check, you can talk about the PPP, you can talk about the EIDL program. Because of the disruption in the economy and individuals are not going to their particular businesses, then how do they pay their rent? How do they pay their mortgage? You know, how exactly are these people surviving? Yes, some people who are fortunate enough to have that kind of leadway have the ability to maybe survive. And that varies. I mean, that varies depending on person's economics and their ability to withstand. So yes, we need a part of the package that we're working in right now. We need this HEROES Act, which we passed a couple months ago, which is in the Senate. What troubled me was that I felt, and I'm not trying to be strictly partisan on it, but that the House, 2 months and almost 15 days, we passed that initiative. Now, the way the process should work ideally is if the Senate did not agree with that initiative, they should have done one or two things. They should either vote it down or amend it and send it back. They shouldn't be waiting here. Today is August the 3rd. It is 90 days from an election, which has huge implications, not just for the country, but for the world. 90 days before an election. Now, that was passed 2 months and 15 days ago. Now, may you agree or disagree with it, the ideal situation worked, because when I recall in the legislature, is if you have an initiative, you vote it, you put it up, and then you try to figure out what is your compromise. That's the way, but because in the meantime, who's getting hurt? Individuals, small businesses, realtors. I mean, you're caught in the middle. You're caught in the middle because individuals, you know, what, I mean, gonna evict them? I mean, you're gonna do what? Put them out on the street? I mean, what's that gonna solve? I mean, put them out on the street. You as real estate are not in the business of not having tenants or not having people buy real estate. I don't think that's the way it works. The idea is you want people to work, you want people to be in business, you want that to happen because that's how people make money. So it's that short-sightedness, which I said earlier, that troubles me, where an initiative was passed 2 months. Again, say if you didn't like the HEROES Act, fine. But then put your act up and that's the one thing over the years that has always troubled me, even when I was in the state legislature, about the aspect of just not taking an action, and as a result of the inaction, the people who get hurt are people like yourselves, the individuals get hurt. That's really what's getting hurt, in my view. And as a result of that getting hurt, that means the country's being hurt. And then if the country's being hurt, then that sends messages around the world about our ability to manage and to govern. It's not that the pandemic was created by any particular party, but the question is, how do you manage it? That is the question. How do you manage it? How do you handle it? So in 90 days, people will have to make a decision about who they best think has the ability to manage this disaster we're in.
I think everybody, well, everybody, a lot of people share your view on just getting it done. Like, do something, don't do nothing, try something, try it. That being said, with the, is your team working with the governor or Mayor Kenny, his administration on, you know, some of these, you know, eviction issues and housing crisis, that sort of thing?
The answer is yes, yes, yes to all those.
Okay.
Because the district I represent is the 3rd congressional district. It's a Northwest, North Philly, West Philadelphia, South Philadelphia, Independence Hall, Liberty Bell, schools like St. Joe and LaSalle and Community College is injured. There's 18 congressional districts in Pennsylvania. I'm one of 18. There will be huge voter turnout in a particular district that I'm in. But yes, I'm working with the mayor, I'm working with the governor, because it goes back to that part of where I said to you about self-enlightened leadership. You know, nobody by themselves. Look, in the city of Philadelphia, we have some huge challenges at numbers in the ballpark of about 23 or 24% unemployment, not unemployment, poverty. And then you put a pandemic on top of that. And then you put social unrest. You take that combination and you put that all on top of it, you see a city that is very much, and then you put the census, which is due by the end of September to be collected, because the census is very important to the distribution around funding, i.e. anything that you would talk about, the housing, and then there's the political representation. As I said to you, Pennsylvania is holding its own, but Florida and California, them places are a lot more growth. So that's a challenge for us. So yes, I work with the mayor and the governor in whatever way I can to try to contribute to a situation where we're in this together. And nobody can do it by themselves. No one's ever done it by themselves.
Yeah, challenging. I know one of our, in real estate, we deal with, families and children and schooling, and I know that's a challenge, the education, and Philadelphia is going online in the beginning. Are there any concerns for some of the kids in some of these areas that don't have Wi-Fi and?
You hit it around the head. It's kind of hard to have essential work, and that's a relatively new term. When you think you have people who are working in grocery stores, SEPTA, hospitals, to have people working in them and then talk about being a parent. There's probably no more job more important than being a parent. You have to have some huge management skills in managing a household. And it depends a great deal on what your financial situation is like, even though there's a lot of people doing it without the financial situation, but they're doing the best that they can. And a school district, which is, part of the initiative I started, and it shows you, when I first got to Congress, I saw that the president did an initiative that he borrowed from 1986. Tip O'Neill was Speaker of the House, and Ronald Reagan was President of the United States. He took an old post office building and converted it to a hotel. And he used the historical tax credits as a contributing source to do it. So I said, if we can use that tool for him to convert a hotel, a post office into a hotel, I said, why can't we use that tool for school buildings? The average school building in the city of Philadelphia is almost 70 years old. So the fact of the matter is, if you're going to talk about the 21st century and you're going to talk about building these facilities, you obviously need to use all the tools that are available. Interesting enough, I got that bill passed just a month ago, in what you call HR2, moving forward. It's in there, it's in the Senate. Now I've been working on that bill since I was in the state legislature, because the part of it was the amenities are the aspects that draw people in terms of where they live. Houses, renting, commercialization, all of these elements are elements that drive decision making. Education. What kind of education is being provided? Well, the problem is in Philadelphia, it is an unequal education system for different reasons. And it doesn't deliver education for every group of people. And as a result, you see the results of it. You see the results of it, because if I'm an individual who works for, let's say, the post office, or I'm one of those essential workers that I talked to you about, look at my environment. I mean, there's things I can do and things I cannot. And then I move. I move because I can't afford that. But can I really afford to operate where I move to in terms of that real estate? That real estate connection is the aspect of building the net worth of people in that various communities. And the question is, how is it used? And people understanding, how is the financing availability of the, I always like to tell a story. I have an aunt, she's no longer alive, she's 99. And I remember, this is when she was in her 80s. She was a domestic and she was looking for a place to live, but she couldn't get the place because she was too old, so she couldn't get the loan. I signed for the loan. There was something called the Philadelphia Plan. And I signed for the loan. She just paid the mortgage, which in return was the rent to me, and I signed it. So what I'm saying to you, that gave her a place to stay. So she didn't have any other place to stay. That was a place for her to stay. What I'm saying to you is the greatest challenge is why you have to have a housing first strategy. Because a housing first strategy allows the ability for people to live. People got to live somewhere. Mm-hmm. I was in Los Angeles many, many months ago. I don't know anybody, but you may be familiar with Skid Row. If you go to Los Angeles, homelessness is something here, the second largest city in the nation. And it's rather disturbing to see as many people living on the streets. I mean, literally living on the streets. So I'm saying to you that there has to be a housing strategy, and the only place that does the best housing strategy, good or bad, is the federal government. Because that new market tax credit I just described to you, low-income housing program. So you have to have that, you have the availability to the marketplace. And so that's the kinds of things we should be working on to address it. That's why I think you see why homelessness has gotten even worse. Housing is a part of it, mental health is a part of it, the conditions people live in. And that's where the federal government, and I hate to, it's almost like all these things have creeped upon the federal government's responsibility, because cities don't have the sources and states dependent. And you look at the state doesn't have a Department of Housing. They have PHFA. That's all that they have. And the same things. And so I'm just saying to you, that's that self-enlightened leadership, because if not, you're gonna have these people out on the street and rural. They could be in rural, they could be in urban. They may be hidden rural. Somewhere in rural Pennsylvania, they may be hidden. You don't see them like in urban. But in rural, I assure you, among seniors and others, that they are there.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything our association, realtors, can do? I mean, you talked about all those elements that you talked about that are affected by the pandemic. Take the pandemic away, we still have some of those issues. Is there anything we realtors can do to help?
Well, let me say this to you. In a strange way, if you're familiar with, there was in not 1945, but there was the Marshall Plan for Europe. The CARES Act and the HEROES Act remind me of the version of the Marshall Plan that we did to Europe. Why do we have to move to the point of a pandemic in order to have the Hercules response that we have, even though it's been on a temporary basis? So I would say to you, the more we can force conversations like what we're having now, not in a crisis stage. The first thing somebody says, I'm going to say this because they think Democrats want to spend too much money and Republicans don't want to spend any money. Well, I try not to get into that, but you need investment in order to make changes in some of these communities. So when you say as an organization, we need to have these conversations. I mean, as I said to you when I was in the legislature, It was only through external events that drove our behavior that really got some things done. Give you an example. Food deserts are areas where there's insufficient quality of food. Food is medicine. Food is extremely important to everybody. Let me know who doesn't eat food. Even vegans like food. They just like a different kind of food. So I came up with an initiative in '04 when I was with the state legislature about how to address food deserts. Matter of fact, I gave the idea to Michelle Obama and her people, and they adopted because you may recall, she was trying to deal with obesity. And the way she's trying to deal with obesity is by having quality locations to offer choices to people, because only through choices given to people, for people, everybody else, can you try to address things like quality in terms of the kinds of super in what you call the built-in environment. Now, I started that in '04. We passed in Pennsylvania. As they always like to describe Pennsylvanians or states as the laboratories of democracy. Well, I was able to get that idea, and it was not at the federal government, in the Farm Bill. Farm Bill comes along every 5 years. And it's ironic that when I first got there, I got on the Ag Committee. The bill had already been adopted in the Farm Bill. So a state policy that started in Pennsylvania became a part of the national policy. Became part of the national policy, something I did. Secondly, the CHIP program, dealing with children. I just became chairman of the Appropriation Committee, and Alan Kukovich used to be from Western Pennsylvania. And there was a senator from, I'll think of his name in a minute, from Lancaster. It was a Democrat and Republican. And we used the cigarette tax as a funding mechanism for the CHIP program, which deals with children at young age. Hillary Clinton embraced that idea in 1992, and that became a national idea. So 2 initiatives I was connected with, the CHIP program and the food deserts. Very essential. Both of them are very essential. The CHIP program still exists, is in a national policy, and the Farm Bill. They both came from Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania. So what I'm saying to you is, when you say, what can you do? It's when you force these kind of conversations, and I don't mean you should have to force, but it's in our collective interest. It's in yours as an organization. It's in the state's interest. It's that self-enlightened leadership that I told you about. The more self-enlightened leadership, that self-enlightened leadership can then in return become national policy. I gave you 2 examples of national policy. So not something that's just unique in Pennsylvania, all other 49 states, and can move around the world. I've had the pleasure of going to Bangladesh, and I was in Bangladesh with the CARES organization. CARES has been in existence almost 75 years. And it's interesting. A lot of their strategies are the same thing we do domestically. For example, when I went to Bangladesh and I went to Jordan, they were trying to empower women to be entrepreneurs. I'm on a small business committee. They was trying to teach women about building skill sets, right, to empower themselves. Those are the same things I see, not just in Philadelphia, but all across Pennsylvania. So when I was in Jordan, I saw that. When I was in Bangladesh, I saw that. The very same policies are there. So I'm sharing with you a lot of the same things that you see right at home. So become a part of the world citizens debate and discussion about this world. Become, larger than what you do. That's what Congressman John Lewis was talking about some good trouble. For the sake of this world, for the sake of this world. So I've been big in agriculture, I've been big in small businesses, I do ways and means. All those things I've tried to contribute to in some ways. So you as an organization, which has some far reach, because you are influencers, connected to, you take inventory of all your various, as an organization, relationships. I assure you, you have some huge influences, not just in Pennsylvania, in this country and this world, that we need. I'm just telling you, if ever, and this is my advice, if ever your existence on earth as a human being is greatly needed, is now. It is definitely now. I'm talking about no one lives in a vacuum by themselves. And since I've been in Washington since October 2016, this is 2020. And I just share with you that I admit to you, I didn't intend to go to Washington because I love the state legislature and I love what I was doing. But now that I'm here, one last thing I'll say to you, I have I developed a good relationship with the trade representative of the United States. And I'm hosting an event sometime in August on trade. I just finished talking to the consulate from Canada. Pennsylvania is a huge trading partner with Canada. So there's Canada and there's Mexico. That exchange between Canada and Mexico is extremely important to Pennsylvania and vice versa to them. Well, Africa is huge in terms of potential opportunity and what it looks like in the future. So I'm going to be hosting with the trade representative with, how can we take advantage of that kind of opportunity? Because you always got to look for opportunity. You always got to look for expanding. To address the issues that I'm talking to you about, it is a question of opportunity. It is only through the expansion of opportunity will we address some of these issues that we face today. And may that be in real estate, obviously need sources of money and income to either buy or to rent. And the people who need it have to have sources of opportunity. So I think that the political process has to be one that recognizes that this is not Democrat or Republican. It's not liberal or conservative or Tea Party, or I call it Tea Party hot chocolate or whatever you call it. It requires a level of sophistication. And you don't have to be a genius to understand that we will only do this unless we function together.
Agree. So talking, going back to real estate and the cycle of real estate, if there's economic growth, there's purchase power, and then people can purchase homes. With the CARES Act too, can you talk a little bit about that and how that might help some of these small businesses, some of the homeowners? Is it going to help them? What does that look like?
Well, Maxine Waters, who is the chair from California of financial services, has a $100 billion initiative that's connected in the HEROES Act. It's in the package. Now, that doesn't go anywhere unless it passes the Senate. I voted for it. And it talks about all the elements of all the tools regarding renting and, forbearance and all those type of things. But there needs to be a sort of timeout. Because if people are unemployed and not working, they're stressing between how did they do it. So, but you need to do both. I'm not one who says you should be punishing real estate owners and people who own real estate, but I'm not. I don't like to see the residents, and I don't like to see the real estate people caught in the middle of it, because no one can give a clear time frame. Here we are, August the 3rd. Most conversations you hear relating to the virus is there won't be some type of cure, they think, until 2021. So that means, how did it exist? So that means the only thing that you can temporarily do, in my view, in holding this together is the federal government. That's the debate today. It's ironic, we're not in session, but we're on a 24-hour call because, as I described to you earlier, there's no there. I mean, and I'm gonna be frank, the Republicans want to do something limited. The Democrats do not. The Democrats want to go the opposite direction. Okay, the Democrats have a much more expansive approach, something that you yourselves would, I think, be interested in, because it expands, it tries to address those issues. The big debate is about the opening of schools, the opening of the economy. Well, you can talk about that, but until you address the health situation that we have, it's kind of hard to start talking about people back to school, back to work, in a confidence question. See, I don't care how much you do. I don't think you're gonna force people to go back to school. I don't think you're gonna force, as much as businessmen want to get workers back, you're not gonna force the workers or the people. It's not, that's what I mean by self-enlightened leadership. I mean, all this thing, just open up and they will come. No, I don't. I think you see, it's not as simple as they will come. People don't have to go. I mean, yeah, there's some people who have gone back, and there's some people who are not taking this serious, but you only need to look at the numbers of what's happening with hospitalization and what's happening in the hospitals as an indicator that this needs to be taken much more serious. So I'm saying to you is, so when you talk about real estate, and you talk about that aspect of it, it's still kind of hard to deal with it until you get a little sense of order. That's kind of my view of it. I just don't think you could either do the things you want to address. You can try. I don't think you're just going to force people. You talk to any mom or dad regarding their kid, you talk about people working and stuff. And particularly if they, Doug Peterson of the Philadelphia Eagles, it was announced, discovered that he has the virus. Immediately, that takes him off the field for 14 days, and he has to work through Drew Steele, I think his name is. He has to work through a Zoom to his other football coaches. So for 14 days, he's taken out of existence. So you start talking about it, you take people out of this economy for 14 days, then you see the effect. You begin to go through that. It's a chain effect. Mm-hmm. So that's why I've always said that nobody can do in isolation. It's foolish to think. Look, even members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, okay? So think, the Congress where you talk about the CARES Act or the HEROES Act, or needs to be passed, you gotta hope that all members of Congress are not taken out. Because how do you do? Because you need 218 votes in the House, and you need a certain amount of votes. So it's all interconnected. That's what I'm saying to you. So when you mentioned to me, yes, I think we should do that. But here I am Monday, I'm talking to you as a group, but I'm also knowing that we need to get that done. But the problem in Washington, my observation, even though I'm there, I'm not talking, you know, look, one of the greatest things about the role I played, look, I always describe myself as Satchel Paige, who was around an awful long time. And I've seen what's taking place in Washington before, right? You know, you both sides gotta come to the table. Deadlines gotta get it done. That's what I'm just telling you. So you know where we stand as the Democrats. We're much more expansive in the approach, and the Republicans are much more narrow in the approach. I think, not to, I'm a Democrat, I think I'm more supportive of the expansion. Like you're talking about rent, you're talking about money available, all these kinds of things. You ain't just talking about, you know, they talking about, well, don't do anything for cities and states. Well, if you don't do anything for cities and states, only thing you're gonna do is people gonna be laid off. And then when you lay them off, then some system has to pick that up. Mm-hmm. Now the restaurant industry, you know, places like, is devastated. The restaurants are devastated. The restaurants are connected. You know, some of them same people you talk about in the restaurant industry rent apartments or somewhere, right? So if you shutting them down, that means them workers are shut down. If them workers are shut down, that means they can't pay the rent. Then who's gonna pay the rent? If the federal government doesn't give a stimulus or something, and then, you know, here we don't even do a good job of that because we got the $1,200 stimulus. Now I'm gonna tell you something. It sounds like a lot. Let me tell you, the execution is very poor in the delivery. The Treasury Department, which we have oversight, Internal Revenue, and then the PPP program, right? In terms of who they giving versus the EIDL program. The execution and delivery of it has been very poor, that in return has contributed to where we are today. Because poor execution has meant poor outcome, which in return, if you are a realtor or something, and a person tells you, well, you know, I'm a little short, I can't do that right now for you. You got one or two choices. You either trying to do something about that person paying, and that person say they don't have it because they up here, they gotta make choices between what they have and the demands on their money. And a lot of times, I'm not so sure, you know, people sometimes don't want to hear that. Their attitudes are almost like, I got problems, you got problems. But it ain't your fault and it's not their fault. Mm-hmm. This pandemic is not anybody's fault. Now, how it is managed, I will say to you, is some people's fault. That's, if anything that is anything you can point to, is how it is being managed and how it is being handled. And because of the poor handling of it, has basically left all of you in the middle.
Like we're at point A, we need to get to C, and the B needs to be figured out a little better.
Correct. Right? So yeah. That could only happen unless, you know, where I come from and the school I've been in, you know, I had the pleasure of being chairman for man. I'll tell you a little quick story. I was elected as chairman of the appropriation committee in 1990. And I remember it was shades of, it was a guy by the name of Matt Ryan around in Delaware County. He was the Republican leader. And he said that I was very eager. I was wanting to get the deal done. If you look back at 1990, it was in the midst of a recession. Bob Casey was governor. And I remember going to him, and he said to me, it's not soup yet, Dwight. Now, I was of the belief I must have been 36 years old at that time. I was of the belief that we create the opportunity. But he was making a point to me is that the members wasn't there yet. Now we wound up passing that budget on August the 4th. I made a commitment to myself that was in 1991 that in those 3 years that I was chairman, never was the budget late again. Because I made a commitment that I was going to make sure that never was we going to have that disruption again in people's lives. So for the next 3 years, 92, 93, 94, as a matter of fact, 93, if you check back, you Google, we broke a historical record because the Democrats got in charge for about a month or two. We was in charge of the House. Mike Hershock, Vince Fuel, and I, we passed the budget before Memorial Day. Never had that. You check that, you'll see, never had that happen. We passed it before Memorial Day because I was determined. I was embarrassed. So 1991, 92, 93, 94. 91 was the disaster, 92, 93, 94. We never had that again because I was embarrassed by the fact that we couldn't execute and we couldn't get our budget done on time. So if you look at from 94 on and you check the different times, I don't think you will ever have seen anything like that had happened again. I understood that, so I'm saying to you, the challenging time we have today in Washington, from my perspective, there's no sense of urgency. May you agree or disagree? And I gotta say this, I give Nancy Pelosi credit because we passed the HEROES Act, which if you go through it, you will see it talks about rent, talks about things of that nature. We passed that 2 months and 10 days ago. And you just don't see that again. That's what my view is. So when you talk about school openings and you talk about all those things, they're all affected, like you and they are all affected by their sources of revenue. You see the state passed its budget back, I think in June. The state passed its budget, but we're constantly going through this.
Okay, well, Congressman, we are almost at the top of the hour, and we always like to check in and see if the group has any questions for you. But before I do that, I usually hand that over to Matt. I just want to thank you for joining me on my first coffee talk back in the summer. It's been a great conversation. I hope we can have more in the future. And I always like to leave on a positive note. And I asked my guests, if you had a magic wand and you could dream big, what would your dream be?
Work together.
Yeah.
No matter who
like
you are, no matter who you are, no matter what you are, where you are, no matter what part of the world you're in, I would just say, work together. I ain't tell you how, what you gotta do. I just tell you at the end of the day, let's just, as John Lewis would say, let's get in some good trouble.
I like that. I like that. All right. Thank you. Matt, go ahead. Do you want to field the question?
Congressman, we have a couple of questions in here. As Stephanie already said, we're kind of up against a hard time limit here. You were speaking earlier about rentals and the difficulty for tenants. One of our members is asking about the other side, and that is the property owners themselves and the position that landlords find themselves in. You mentioned the HEROES Act. Is there any kind of possibility of help going towards landlords on the other side of the equation? Because it seems like we hear a lot about tenants.
Well, let's look at that. The answer is yes, but I understand the question the gentleman is asking, the person is asking, because if you put money in that person's pocket, then you figure they should put money in the landlord's pocket. One is connected to the other. That is, you make sure the stimulus check, you make sure the unemployment, you make sure those things happen, and in return, they can pay their rent or they can pay their mortgage. So you put money in that person's pocket, who in return put money in the pocket of that landlord. That is probably the most essential element that can happen. That's getting people back to work. That's making people more productive. So you put money in that person's pocket, which in return makes sure that that person could put money in that landlord's pocket. So I said to you, I don't like the idea of having landlords be pitted against I don't think that's the way it should be. I don't think, that really government is shifting the responsibility to landlords to take care. This disaster didn't happen because of the landlord and didn't happen because of the resident. So what happens is, in my view, becomes the choice that you have. You can evict a person, but if you evict them and you put them out on the street, you're really adding them. I mean, we got that problem in Philadelphia. You put them out on the street, what is that doing? So, the question is, for those of us, we have to have a package that is all encompassing. That's why I said the Democrats are more for an expansion of a project more so than a short-term approach.
So we have another elected official here on our chat with us today, and that would be our member, Councilman Alan Dom, and he wanted to chime in real quick. So Congressman, say good morning to Councilman Alan Dom.
Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Congressman. Thank you for being here. And I just want to say to everybody, the Congressman endorsed me in the last election. Thank you so much. And Congressman Evans is one of the few who understands business, small business, gets it, and is a bridge builder. And if anything we need today is a bridge builder. So Congressman, thank you. Whatever I can personally do to help you, I'm available, and I'll do whatever I can to help you. You're doing a great job. Thank you. And thank you.
You two are, I know Alan very well now. We always joke about, he always asked about the restaurants in my neighborhood. Where, he goes around that. So that's a plus, because we need that kind of thoughtfulness in this process to try to get people to, figure out what's the best ways to do these things.
Yeah. Well, I love to eat, so that's a problem for me. Have a good seeing you, and take care.
Me too. Take care.
All right. On that note, it's good to end on a laugh. If you folks see in the chat, representative from the Congressman's office has posted some information about how to get in touch with the Congressman and his staff. So please check that out. Congressman Evans, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time. Great insights, great thoughts. Thank you for all the leadership that you have shown to Pennsylvania, the city of Philadelphia, and now doing that on the federal level. So thank you very much for being with us today. Stephanie, thank you for getting us back into the saddle with Coffee Talk. And Bill Festa, our president of PAR, thank you for joining us today. Good to see you guys. Have a great week. Keep it tuned for more things coming up and more Coffee Talks. Take care. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you, Stephen.
Bye, Roderick.